Hi, this is Doug Mack. Welcome back to Anatomy Class. I wanted just to visit with you just a little bit and talk to you about something. Now, of course, as you get to know me, you'll realize that there's some things I feel so passionately about. This is one of them, medical terminology, because of the fact that when you get into the medical office, whether as an MA or an RN, LPN, a doctor, or even a patient for that matter, if you aren't able to read the charting, if you aren't able to read some of the descriptions of what the illness or disease or disorder is, and you can't break it down into medical terms, then all the training you've had or all that you've ever known is really not going to count for much unless you understand the terminology. As you know, I love anatomy because anatomy is basically the owner's manual to our body. And if we are able to break down some terminology words where we can understand that terminology a little bit better, it's going to help us having a better appreciation of all of these medical terms that we run across, that we read, that we see and hear in the doctor's office, and it'll just make us much more well-rounded. Medical terminology is kind of like learning another language. As we see here on the screen, I've coined it a new language. When you learn a new language, you have to break words down in certain simple orders where our brain can wrap around them, and even in the pronunciation of them, we have to break the words down and understand the different parts of the words to be able to make meaning of them. And that's what I hope our little orientation here will be for you, for medical terminology. I wrote an example word here at the top of our screen, sublingual. Now, sublingual is basically used within the digestive system in the study of anatomy, and sublingual means underneath the tongue. Now, you might know of someone that may be taking some kind of medication where its application is actually under the tongue. You and I can get B12 vitamins and drops that can be placed under the tongue or sublingually. So if you ever see that at your local pharmacy, you'll see that on the back of the bottle for the B12 sublingual drops that they are to be placed under the tongue. So what we want to do here is we want to use this as an example to break down this particular word so that we can get a better appreciation of how medical terminology breaks down into words. When you and I were growing up, we learned that the words break down into syllables. Well, in medical terminology, we have a form of that. We break words down into prefixes and suffixes and roots or combining forms. Now, that's also going to cover some of the letters that we use when we connect some of these words together. In other words, our vowels. And when we learned the English language, we knew our vowels as A, E, I, O, U. Well, in medical terminology, we will use vowels as well. There'll be a lot of O's, there'll be a lot of I's that we use to bring these words together, to match them. Just like if we were making a sandwich. We'll start out with a couple of slices of bread. The top slice of the bread would be the prefix, and the bottom slice of the bread would be the suffix. And then, of course, we'll put our root or our ham or turkey or or whatever sounds good to us. I'm getting hungry already. We'll put that in the middle, and then we'll make that complete sandwich. But to make that complete sandwich, we can't just have two pieces of bread. We can't just have a prefix and a suffix. We can't just have the top layer of bread, the bottom layer of bread. We really need something between it, like a root or a combining form or a vowel, something to bring the two pieces together. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the prefix here. We want this prefix, to be the top part of our sandwich, and we want the suffix down here to be the bottom part. But we may be using some of the root or combining form, to create that for us as well. So we might have a vowel like an O or an I or something, in between that. Now, in learning medical terminology, we will most usually, when you and I read a book or we read a magazine article, we start from the left and read to the right. That's how we were raised. That's how our teachers taught us. When we were in grade school, we start from the left and read to the right. In medical terminology, we do things a little bit differently. If in this particular word, sublingual, you'll find out that as you gain more medical experience and you get deeper into medical terminology, you can pretty well find out what a medical word means by doing the opposite of what you and I learned in grade school. We'll start from the right and go to the left. And this really applies to some of the trickier words. You know, if you look at some of these medical words and you go, "Oh man, I can't make any sense of that." If you'll start at the very right or end of that word, or the suffix end of that word, and work backwards to the left, you can make sense of it. Let's take our example here. We have sublingual. Now, at the very end of that word sublingual are the letters AL. Now, what we'll find is that AL means pertaining to. AL means pertaining to, and the center of that word, the sublingu, that's Lingu, which really means tongue. So we're talking about the very end of that word, pertaining to, which is AL, and then you work towards the left to the Lingu, that means tongue. So far what we know is that it's pertaining to the tongue. And then sub, S-U-B, means underneath. That's the prefix for that word sublingual, meaning underneath. So really what all of these letters that we say as sublingual, what that really means is this is pertaining to the tongue underneath. So when we take that B12 drop vitamin and we place it under the tongue, or if it's a nitroglycerin tablet, if it's another kind of medication that is designed to go under the tongue, we call it sublingual. In medical terminology, that's part of a new language for us. But what's really important here is that we know that the prefix is the beginning of a word, the suffix is the end of the word, and that we use root or a combining form or a vowel to connect them. If you'll look at our word up here, we've color-coded it to where the prefix, the green prefix sub, and then lingu and ul. So in other words, we're really dividing a line showing AL as the suffix or the end of that word, and the LINGU right there, that's going to be our root or combining form. And then, of course, we've got the sub up here at the top, as being the prefix or the beginning of that word. So now that's all good and fine. So now we know how to actually read that word. We know how to break that word down. But how do we memorize it? Just like if we were learning a new foreign language, we approach it the same way. The way I would approach it is we use index cards. Now, if you'll notice here, we've got a couple examples, a couple of visuals here of some index cards that we could use. I like to use this approach. Now, as you take other anatomy classes and other terminology classes, your instructors or from your future learning, they may have other methods by which to use. But I like to put the prefixes on one set of index cards. I would take one set of prefix cards and I would make this my prefix cards, and then I would have another set of cards and call them my suffix cards. And on one stack of my cards, like whether I'm doing the prefixes or the suffixes. Like, for example, let's take our stack of prefixes here. On one side of the card, I'm going to write what the actual prefix means. So in other words, I'm going to write, we know that SUB sub is the prefix or the beginning of the word. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write that sub means underneath. So I'm going to write the word underneath right here in this particular part. I'll write the word underneath. On the flip side of that card, I'm going to write sub, S-U-B. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating a stack of index cards, basically using them as flashcards. If you learn a foreign language, like if I wanted to learn Spanish, I'm going to get a stack of index cards. You can get them pretty cheaply. I'm going to get a stack of cards. On one side of the card, if I want to learn Spanish, I'm going to write cat, C-A-T. Well, on the other side of that card, I'm going to write el gato or la gata, so that I can learn by flashing those cards back and forth over and over and over through repetition. I'm going to know that el gato means cat, and I can do it with other words. So that's what I'm doing here with the prefixes, and I encourage you to do the same. Get you a stack of index cards, put a P on the top left-hand corner of your card, and let that indicate prefix. Then put what the prefix means on one side of the card, and you flip that card over, then you're going to write what the prefix is, which is sub. And we're going to do the same thing, with suffixes. We'll create a stack of those too. For example, if I want to start my stack of suffix cards here, well, I know that our suffix in our example here is AL. That means pertaining to. So what I'm going to do is down here on my suffix cards, I'm going to write the words pertaining to. Pertaining, and to. And then I'll flip that card over and write -AL. -AL, which means the suffix or the end of that particular word. And if I do this to my major terminology words that I really want to learn, and you do a few at a time, over time, you're going to have a pretty nice stack of cards. Now, most anatomy books, if you take it at a college, the textbook's going to be broken down into what's called an element column. An element column is going to be just basically a listing of the major terminology words that you need to know for that particular body system that you're working with. It'll give what the word is. It'll give the pronunciation of that word, how to pronounce sublingual, for example, and break it down to where you just repeat the syllables and then you can understand it much better. And then it'll give the elements meaning the prefix or the suffix or the root or combining form of how to break that word down. And then at the end of the column, give you the definition of it. And that's how you learn medical terminology. But if you use the index card system, now you can create the stack for prefixes, you can create a stack for suffixes, you could really create another additional stack for the roots or combining forms. But you know what I found? That if you create a stack of just the prefixes and a stack of the suffixes, you will know most of the medical terminology that you read. It's like playing a little game. If you've ever played a game where someone has given you the beginning of a word and given you the end of a word, and you have to kind of guess what the middle of the word is. In medical terminology, as you start working in the doctor's office and as you start reading more about medical, if you have a particular medical condition and you're wanting to learn anatomy and terminology just to be able to appreciate the information regarding your own illness or disease more, the more you read, then when you learn these prefixes and suffixes, even if it's just those two, your brain will fill in by association and from all the reading that you've done already what those words really are. And that's what's fascinating to me about medical terminology. But you've got to have a system. You've got to have a means by which to memorize these words with. And index cards are just it's a dinosaur way of doing it. But you know what, guys? It works. And that's what I encourage you to do. As you go through the different body systems and as you learn, whether it's the digestive, or any integumentary or lymphatic, any of the systems, this method's going to work for you. So get you a stack of cards, get you a couple different stack of cards, and create some prefixes, create some suffixes. And of course, with this course, you'll have reference to those. You'll have reference to those within this system that we're working with today. So be sure and look at your list of your prefixes and suffixes and your terminology words. And the more you study these, the more you're going to be able to make much more sense out of the body system that you're working in. This is Doug Mack. And I hope this helped illustrate the importance of medical terminology and how it can help you in your career and how it can help you even understand medical conditions for yourself or for a family member and even reading your own patient charting in the future. This is Doug Mack. Have a great day.